You're listening to The Manning Report with your host, James David Manning, the news behind the headlines.
I'm not a supporter of any presidential candidate in any way, shape, or form. I'm not a supporter of the Democrats. I'm not a supporter of the Republicans. I'm not a conservative. I'm not a liberal. I'm not a right-winger or a lefter. But I can tell you this, Bernie Sanders, who I, again, do not support, has got an interesting platform. Bernie Sanders is indicating that all student debt should be eliminated, even the debts of rich white folk who got student debt. But 99% of all student debt is among poor, working class people. Students go to college from poor neighborhoods and end up with $250,000 in debt, in student loans that they're never going to be able to pay off because of interest. Even with a 2% interest, they're never going to be able to pay it off. So this is strangling students who right now are having their checks garnished, their credit marred because of student debt. And Bernie Sanders is saying eradicate the whole thing. It would take less money to eradicate all student debt for every student ever gone to college in America than it did for the so-called tax reform bill that Trump passed going back a year ago, where $1.6 trillion was taken out of the U.S. Treasury. It would not take $1.6 trillion to eradicate all student debt forever. But they did it for the rich boys. They did it for the Wall Street types, but they won't do it for the struggling student, teacher, or a person who got a BA or a BS degree or an MA degree, and they're trying to make their way through the world, even a law degree. They're trying to pay off those huge student debts. And I'm for Bernie Sanders. I think this is something that people need to listen to, and need to listen to very, very carefully. But I want Bernie Sanders, his campaign manager was on one of the local channels on yesterday and on CNN, and I want to let him talk about things I thought he was profound about, how Americans are going to vote based on the theatrical performances of how these debates is going to start tomorrow night in Detroit, or the debates that took place some time ago in South Carolina. Somehow or other that the presidential candidate ought to be chosen because of the debate, how well they can perform. But Bernie Sanders' program manager had a different point of view. I thought it was interesting. He also has a different point of view about socialism. And let me say this to you. Jesus is the biggest socialist I know. There's a rich young ruler, the Bible says, that wanted to join Jesus' 12 disciple group, and Jesus told him, you're rich. Sell all you have, give to the poor, divide up everything you have to the poor, and you can follow me, because that's who we are. We give to the poor. We have all things in common. That's what Jesus taught, and will continue to teach. That's the whole message of Jesus in terms of so Jesus is the biggest socialist. Whether you agree with all socialist practices, or whether you think the Social Security idea was a bad idea, whether you think Medicare for older people is a bad idea or not, it's a socialist idea. But anyway, Mr. Engineer, go ahead and let's listen to what Bernie Sanders' campaign manager had to say. Leave my mic open.
With CNN's two-part, two-night Democratic debate just 2 days away, let's talk about complaints of media bias coming from the left. Here's a headline from the AP this week. It says, Bernie Sanders thinks the media is unfair, so he's created his own. Yes, the Sanders campaign's new web show is called The 99. It's streaming on Facebook and YouTube and other sites. One recent episode asked, is Bernie too consistent for the corporate media? Interesting question. This is all part of a wider strategy. All the campaigns are churning out lots and lots of content, including the Sanders campaign there on YouTube. But the Sanders campaign says they are doing it because many reporters, not all, but many, find Bernie annoying and discount his seriousness. Tensions between the Sanders camp and MSNBC have been especially high. You might think those would be natural allies. So let's find out more about these media bias complaints. Joining me now is the campaign manager for Sanders 2020, Faz Shakir. Great to see you. You're in Detroit. You're getting ready for the debate. We're 2 days away. Do you have expectations for this debate versus NBC's debates? Were there problems with NBC other than those technical glitches, for example?
Brian, I'm going to make a radical comment. This isn't a criticism of CNN. It's really a criticism of the media environment. But I believe these debates tend to make the American people stupider. They're performative theater, and we don't end up having the conversations that affect people's lives. So I don't have super high expectations. I think we're going to try to go through it and answer the questions, respond to Donald Trump's tweets and all those kinds of things. But at the end of the day, this isn't, I think, how you win a campaign.
How do you win a campaign then? Because y'all have been complaining a lot about the media coverage. Don't you need journalists to be out there on the trail with Sanders covering the campaign?
Brian, you know this well, that Bernie Sanders talks to journalists all the time. He talks to Rachel Maddow, talks to George Stephanopoulos, was meeting with a number of media outlets even this week on Jimmy Kimmel and others, getting the message out. But ultimately, at the end of the day, we know and we understand we're a campaign that's built out of taking on power, taking on established power, arguing against the corruption of the political system, the economic system, and in many cases, the media system. And so in order to get that particular message out, you got to go directly to voters. And that's why you hear us trying to build these media channels, talking directly to people.
And Sanders has been doing that for decades, going back to his days in Burlington with public access
now,
TV.
This is almost, parallel to what Tracy Trump says about the media, that the media is fake news. Obviously, there are a lot of things that the media report are biased. They like people, they report on you. They don't like you, they won't report on you. Or if they don't like you, what they report will be excoriating you. So the media does have the power to do that. I'm not in agreeing with Donald Trump that the media is fake news, but they do produce fake stories, or they produce biased stories. And what Faiz Sharad is saying here, who's the campaign manager for Bernie Sanders, is that the media is against Bernie Sanders. They think he's annoying, or they don't like his programs. And mainly the reason why they don't like Bernie Sanders is because he's annoying. It's because Bernie Sanders is against the Wall Street corporate headquarters who make their money. The pharmaceutical people make their money off of these candidates. The banks make their money. Industry makes their money. And so most of these presidential candidates, whether they be Republican or Democrat, bow down to Wall Street, and Bernie Sanders does not. And if Bernie Sanders ever became president, he'd be a wrecking ball on Wall Street. And so I think we need to be mindful of that. Mr. Engineer, you're going to hear the rest of it. I want to set the stage for this coming up in just a second.
The difference now is he can reach a lot more people on YouTube. What is the heart of the critique about what Sanders calls the corporate media? What do you want people like me to do differently?
Well, Brian, this isn't a personal commentary on you or any other journalist. There's many wonderful, talented journalists out there, but in about a minute or so, or 2 minutes or so, you're going to cut to commercial breaks and you're going to see some pharmaceutical ads. You're going to see a lot of ads that are basically paying your bills and the bills of this the entire media enterprise. And what that ends up doing is incentivizing you and others to make sure that you're asking the questions and driving the conversations in certain areas and not in certain areas. Right now, Bernie Sanders is on a bus across.
What evidence do you have of that?
Oh, come on, Brian Stelter, you know better. He just shot you down. I can see your face blushing and your attitude changing. He said the absolute truth. The corporate people are paying your bills. They're paying CNN, and they will not promote anything that goes against them. The pharmaceutical companies continue to rip off people with medication that costs 10 times more here in America than it does in Canada for prescriptions to be filled. And there's a reason why it should be, why they don't want universal health care, and why these networks will not promote a candidate who, like Bernie Sanders, who is promoting the idea that we shouldn't have to pay these expensive and exorbitant fees for medication when we go for prescription being filled. And we shouldn't have to pay these exorbitant debts for college loans for the rest of their life. People will go to school, graduate, get a job, work 40 years, retire, and die, and still unable to pay off that. And the media will not support somebody like Bernie Sanders, and that's just the truth. Whether it be CNN, liberal, or whether it be left, Fox News, or anybody else, they're not going to report. The media, if they like you, and if the corporate America likes you, corporate America used to like me. They don't like me anymore. But if corporate America, if Wall Street likes you, listen, the New York Times ran a big ad, a big page on me when Wall Street liked me. They don't like me anymore. And the media is just as biased as anybody else. The media, whether it be liberal media or whether it be conservative media, they're just as racist and biased as anything else in the world. So if they like you, if you're not stepping on their their money makers, they'll let you come on the air. They'll let you come and speak. But if you're going to, the media is not for the truth. Now, I'm not for Donald Trump fake news. I'm not going to go that far. But I can tell you this, The media is not interested in the truth. The media is not interested in anything that goes against Wall Street, whether it be conservative media or liberal media, whether the ABC, NBC, CBS, MSNBC, CNN. If you are against Wall Street, you ain't getting no CNN. I can tell you that right now. If you are for student loans being paid, if you are for a reduction in medication, listen, people are dying because they can't get insulin. I mean, diabetics are dying because they can't afford insulin, and they're making the decision about how much insulin, and they're watering down their insulin so they can also buy food for the table. And the corporate giants of these pharmaceutical companies are getting richer and richer every day, while people on insulin are dying because they can't afford it. And yet CNN don't want you talking like that on CNN. MSC, Fox News, ABC, CBS, Wall Street Journal, Washington Post, New York Times, LA Times, Chicago Tribune, none of these people want you telling that truth to the American people, because the pharmaceutical people are the people that pay Brian Stelter, Anderson Cooper, Rachel Maddow, what's her name, Sean Hannity. All their bills are paid by these major Wall Street mega corporations. And that's why the media is biased the way they are. And that's why they don't like Bernie Sanders. And that's why they're always trying to promote in these debates and the presidential races somebody that's going to promote Wall Street. And I can tell you this, them rednecks running around there, I can tell you that them rednecks are poor, them tobacco chewing, snuff dipping, handkerchief head rednecks down there in the South that support Trump are poorer now than they were under the days of Obama. And the same thing with black people that supported Obama. But the Wall Street wealthy 1% of the rich are richer now than they've ever been. And the gap is getting wider and wider. And Trump gave $1.6 million to wealthy white people, Wall Street bankers, and he closed down Lordstown plant in Ohio, closed down Carrier Air Conditioning, closed down corporations. He's closed down businesses and corporations all over the Midwest. And yet the bankers, the Wall Street, have been given millions and billions of dollars, in some cases, collectively trillions of dollars, while these redneck, MAGA hat wearing, snuff dipping, tobacco chewing, snagger tooth, unshaved, bad breath, white folk running around there talking about Trump making America great again. Though he's made Wall Street great. He's made rich people great. But I guarantee you, there ain't one of y'all redneck, snagger tooth, F-150, Silverado driving, tobacco dip, chewing, snuff dipping person can stand up and say you have a better income now than you did under Obama. You lie if you do. But Wall Street is going off the charts in terms of the money that they're making. So Bernie Sanders is right on that regard, and I think people ought to pay careful attention to that process as well. This is a bit of a news blog we do, looking at spiritual wickedness in high places for the most part, making some observations about it and giving people a biblical foundation to the way of interpreting, rather than have Sean Hannity or Laura Ingraham or Janine Pirro or Anderson Cooper or Rachel Maddow or Don Lemon, Rush Limbaugh interpret what's going on in the world. You come to me and I'll tell you based on what the Word of God says. They'll just give you their worldly, sinful view. But the Manning Report will tell you what God has said, whether to say yea or nay, whether to go or to stay. You'll be led by the word of Almighty God. Come to the Manning Report on a daily basis to interpret the spiritual wickedness in high places, because there's plenty of it that's going on. And so I'm the Lord's servant, James David Righteous Rebel Manning, and I'm here to serve you with news and information.